Okay, I think it's time to start our lunchtime program. So I'm Gabrielle Allen. I'm the director of the School of Computing at the University of Wyoming. I'm happy to be able to have the opportunity to be up here to kick off this lunchtime session. We have a very distinguished speaker coming up. I want to tell you first just a little about the School of Computing. This is a new academic unit at the university. We're focused on applications of computing and applied computing. Our core mission is to make sure that students across the university have access to academic programs and courses to develop computing-related skills that are critical for the Wyoming workforce and to provide our students with good and broad career opportunities. So we're very new still. We've just been in existence for 2 years. We hired our first great administrative staff in fall 2022. We've only had faculty for the last year. We had some very successful hiring with partnering units across the university on joint hires. And then we also have some faculty who came from our merger last year with the Wyoming GIS Center. And Jeff is always reminding me that spatial is special, so I will put that out there. So it's amazing that we now have 20 faculty who have been active over the last year in teaching and research in all aspects of computing. We already have a minor in computing that's open to students in any major. I think we have one person that's going to sign up today and been pointing out we are giving away free hoodies for all those who enroll in our program. This semester we'll also have our first students in our first Bachelor's of Science in Applied Software Development, which is a new degree in partnership with our community college partners. Next year, fingers crossed, we anticipate having further degrees in both computing and also in data science. So we're growing. We also have a whole host of programs in geographic information science and technology. And for students of you that are here and were asking me questions that I couldn't answer, Beth McMillan, can you wave, Beth, is the person to ask about all questions about our courses. Thank you, Beth. So the school is growing, and I'm really happy to report that we're on track with all our goals to have impact in student programs, in new external funding to support interdisciplinary computing research and research infrastructure, in our activities and engagement with our Wyoming community partners, from industry partners, community colleges, to K-12 institutions and others. We have a pretty broad portfolio. I'd like to acknowledge up here the Blockchain Stampede for being a good partner for us for the last 2 years and allowing the School of Computing to work alongside their team and their annual event that is going on this week to establish what we're calling the Wyoming Computing Symposium. This symposium was established in a partnership with the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, our close partners in promoting computing across the state, to help showcase the computing research and development that is already taking place here in Wyoming and the region, that is really important for strengthening our economy here and developing our workforce. So the symposium will focus on a different theme each year, and the broad goal is to make sure that we're including emerging computing technologies and approaches, innovative applications of computing, and computing entrepreneurship. So last year, the Center for Blockchain and Digital Innovation embedded our first symposium in the middle of their stampede. The event there was called Emerging Computing Approaches, Technologies and Applications. This year, we are focused on data analytics and computing advances for drone applications, and we've already heard in the sessions this morning how central these technologies are across Wyoming, from a great talk from law enforcement talking about how they use drones to understand traffic events, to wildlife agencies wanting to understand where the pronghorn are across the whole of the state. So now looking forward to the rest of this afternoon's sessions and also tomorrow's workshops that we will have here. So at this point, I would like to stop talking and introduce the University of Wyoming President Ed Seidel, who himself is a renowned computational scientist and a good supporter of all aspects of computing, who will give us some more remarks and introduce our very distinguished lunchtime speaker. So thank you.
Thanks, Gab. Welcome, everybody. How many of you are from outside of Wyoming? Really a lot, so that's great. I think we're trying to galvanize the whole region here around computing and its applications here. And of course, the School of Computing, as you just heard from Gabrielle, is really aiming to bring computing to everyone across the entire university, for every student, for any major in any college, as well as to applications that really matter to Wyoming and the region across the whole area. So thank you for coming. I want to thank Dr. Allen, who I know very well, director of the School of Computing, and her partner, Ian Walker. Is Ian here? I don't know if Ian is here, but Ian is the new department head of electrical engineering and computer science. And watch out, computing is now run entirely by Brits at this university. So, but they've got a real head of steam and a lot of momentum here. Let me turn to talk about our governor. So a number of you from out of state may not know as much about the governor. Of course, those of you from Wyoming will know basically everything I'm going to say, but I want to make sure everybody understands how lucky we are to have Mark Gordon as our governor. He grew up on the family ranch in Casey, Wyoming, where he learned the values of hard work, integrity, and the importance of working together. And these are things that I have learned firsthand are just critical to Wyoming and what it can do, because people really do work together here in ways that I've really never seen anywhere else, and they're dedicated in ways I've never seen anywhere else. So there's so much we can do together. Small state in terms of population, but mighty in terms of what it can accomplish. The governor's worked tirelessly to set Wyoming on a sustainable fiscal path. He's committed to making government more transparent, accessible, productive, and efficient. He believes government is best when it's closest to the people, and committed to giving local communities the tools they need to thrive. And he's a staunch advocate of the quality of education in all modes, public and private, for all children, all students, and particularly, I have to say, here at the University of Wyoming. I'll say a couple more words about that. He was elected in 2018 as governor and led Wyoming through some historically difficult times. And in fact, I came here during the very early phase of one of those times. Some of you who know the university and my introduction here, I interviewed for this job as president in February of 2018. There was not a single question on how would you handle a global pandemic nor a $50 million budget cut. But nonetheless, we managed to get through those things. And the governor is really very, very helpful all the way through all of that. I've been privileged to observe the governor's efforts firsthand for 4 years now on many initiatives that advance both the state and the university, including major projects related to energy, technology, economic development. He helps the university in many ways. And so, for example, we have a thing just down the road here in Cheyenne called the NCAR Wyoming Supercomputer Center, which now has a 20 petaflop machine for the National Science Foundation's National Center for Atmospheric Research, or NCAR, and it has lots of floor space for additional collaborations. Those of you who are interested, we're working hard with partners to think about how to take better advantage of that, both for computing and for economic development. He has been very supportive of the blockchain efforts. This is part of the blockchain stampede and smart contracts, leading Wyoming to have the strongest and I think most impactful legislative framework in the entire United States to support this industry. There we go. And we just launched a new center for the study of Bitcoin, by the way, just a couple of months ago. So in addition to the blockchain, the Center for Digital Innovation that Steve Lupien runs, Bradley Rutler runs the new Center for Bitcoin that's just been launched back in July. He's been very supportive of the School of Energy Resources, led by Holly Krutka, for R&D partnerships with companies to help advance the economy of the state around applied research. And also the Center for Innovation for Fluid Flow in Porous Media. I would say probably, I wouldn't say one of, it is the world's leading laboratory for the study of fluid flow in porous media, other words, oil and gas in rocks, and how to get it out and how to enhance it. Finally, and this is something I work very closely with the governor on, and very proud of it, the Wyoming Innovation Partnership, or the WIP initiative, that has so far provided more than $70 million for the university and its 8 community college partners to develop programs jointly that help advance the economy of the state of Wyoming, both preparing the workforce and creating new programs. For example, programs to enhance enhanced digital and computing skills. We now have what's turning out to be a statewide program for software development. It's just one example. And we're working on building that out in terms of data science and AI and its applications and so on. And then innovation hubs that are being built out across the entire state to help support entrepreneurship here in Laramie and in places across the entire state. So Governor Gordon, I know I've gone on for a while, but I really wanted to make sure you understand how much we appreciate you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here and a great honor. I thought Ed would maybe keep going for a bit, so I could talk to you less. But it is really, truly great to have a visionary like Ed and also one like Gabby. In fact, this is a university that is really built about the future, thinking about the future, and so on. But as we were talking about drone technology, and I know there's been a lot of conversation, I want to lead off with a couple of personal stories about that. You know, I have a wife who has done a tremendous amount about hunger, and she grew up as a med tech, getting her degree here, and was working in a hospital, never was around ag operations at all. We got married, she got fascinated. The next thing I knew was for an anniversary present, I asked her, you know, what would you like? Thinking, you know, it might be a piece of jewelry, might be a trip somewhere, might be a dinner, anything like that. She said, I want a drone. So we got her a drone. And and it was truly awesome. So our ranch, we're in the northern part of the state, Buffalo, and it's really got what we call gumbo mud, the kind of stuff that if you're walking across the ground and it's wet, your feet are going to weigh about 30 pounds, and they're going to be about 6 feet in diameter by the time you make it 3 or 4 steps. And we had to gather bulls out of a pasture, which is really quite, well, we're pretty rugged. Big valley, a couple of big hills, things like that. And my wife said, hey, you know what? I think I've got a drone. Maybe we can gather bulls that way. So we got out there, and we're on top of a hill, and she got her sticks out, and you know, away we flew. And it was pretty cool because she was able to gather the bulls, bring them out, and I thought, cool tool. This is awesome. This is going to save us a lot of time on horses. This is going to save, you know, this is just going to make things great. In fact, our house sits in the middle of the pasture where we calve. And one of the things you always want to do is, you know, you don't want to bother the cow. You just want to kind of watch as the cow has their calf to see if there's a complication. And, you know, what better application really could I think of than saying, hey, honey, can I use your drone to be able to check on the cows that are out in the pasture, you may be having a calf. Well, so put this together. The bulls got gathered with the drone. You don't want to bother the cow, and here's this idiot with a drone coming down with, it sounds kind of like a giant mosquito, you know, trying to monitor what the cow's doing. Needless to say, it didn't work very, very well. But, you know, fast forward in the years that have come, it's really quite fascinating. So what I really want to talk about today is really the fact that in my belief, this is one of the most exciting times to be alive. Not only have we got technology that can do extraordinary things, and we're seeing what that innovation can bring every single day. In fact, a lot of what we've talked about today has been about what are the new applications and how can they be brought to bear on some of our biggest problems. And we can talk about carbon, we can talk about fertility in the soil, we can talk about water, we can talk about weather, we can talk about modeling, we can talk about GIS. All of these things are incredibly important and really cool. And there's so much in the beginning of this technology and understanding it that really, as humans, we need to engage. in ways that I don't think we've had to for a long time. Now, there's always been this concept that it took about 40 years before people really understood what the advent of the TV meant to their home life, what that meant to communications, what that meant to them. And we're really at the advent of GIS, and if you look at what that has done, there are some really interesting trends. And there's some interesting concepts. One of those came up I was speaking at a conference that CNBC was holding. It was really about the advent of technology. Apple was there, Oracle was there, a number of other companies. But it was fascinating to me that they had so many of these really bright minds in the tech space that were sitting around a table with a CNBC anchor. And the most remarkable thing was that the CNBC anchor said, now with the advent of AI, where we know all of human knowledge, where we can find that, all of that, do we really need to study history anymore? So let me leave that with you for just to ponder for a second. To me, that was truly a frightening concept, because yeah, you have access to all, and I'm not even talking about, the stuff that is generated. I'm just talking about, let's just say we have a repository of everything in history without the ability to interpret it as humans, without the ability to have judgment. We probably are at a loss. And I'll give you two examples, one where it's really, really important. I have a sister-in-law who is a professor of radiology at UCLA, and her point to me is that no one can read X-rays or MRIs better than machines can. Absolutely no one. But it is really incumbent on the doctor to be able to make the decisions about what could be cancerous, what could be precancerous, what could be absolutely benign. Now we shouldn't feel safe in that assumption that we're absolutely essential to make this all work. We have a responsibility to step up and learn and understand, and that's what's so great about conferences like today. The thing that really scares me a little bit about, and as I say, this is an evolution. We're starting at the beginning of GIS. People's knowledge, this is documented, people's knowledge of geography and how to get from one place to another has been truly affected by cell phones. And the example that I would give you was landing in Casper. I don't know if any of you know Casper, but Casper is one of our larger cities. For folks from Colorado, smaller hamlets. But a few years ago, Wyoming decided they would open the door to Uber, and which some of our legislators were referring to as Uber, and what was remarkable to me, I've grown up there. There's an airport on one side and the restaurant on the other side of town. And there's an interstate that goes in between. And it's a pretty direct route from one to the other. My wife was coming down from the ranch. We needed to get to Cheyenne. I said, let me meet you for lunch. I'll take an Uber. And she said, cool. So we knew where we were going. I knew where I was going. I got into Uber. Excuse me, I can't get it out of my head. I got in the Uber, and the gentleman driving said, I'm working for Uber now, but do you mind if I just take the interstate because they're taking me around Outer Drive? So if you know Casper, you know that's a long ways around. But what was fascinating, now Casper, unlike Colorado, does not have traffic jams or anything that would be the kind of thing that you'd normally find to be rerouted. But it became clear that the program had actually made a choice that was not necessarily beneficial to the driver and was going to cost more for me And yet the assumption that we had in that was that, well, it's a computer. It's got to know more than I do. And so I think that critical perspective is what is really, really important about as we move forward and look at what this can do for us, how critical it is that we have judgment and that we review and think about it in the context of history. Now, you can tell I'm a history major, so I don't want to see it go away. But the fact of the matter is also really important from another standpoint. My daughter got her master's here at UW in hydrology and is now a PhD in hydrology and geology. And her study has been about irrigation and what happens in a warming climate. Her PhD thesis was on the eastern slope of the Sierras, and her master's work here was on sort of late season flow back into riverine systems from irrigation, various irrigation methodologies. Now, what emerges is that we can be incredibly precise and know a lot more about how we use our water, and that water efficiency is something that is really demanding as we think about our future. Well, look at the Colorado River. You have the upper basin and lower basin states. You have all of them constrained by water now. The analysis that was put in place initially was done at a time when we didn't really understand what evaporation would mean or transpiration would mean to those systems. There were frameworks that were put in place and models that have been developed and grown over time. Happy to say Wyoming's monitoring, speaking of how important technology is better than anyone else in the system. Our modeling we still need to work a little bit on, but the fact of the matter is there's only so much water. So water efficiency feels really, really important. Really important. Because we need to make sure that we get water to places like, California and others, and we've got this compact that's in place. But my daughter's work really indicates that over time, things happen if you're too efficient with water. Now, some of us that love the wildlife and the outdoors will recognize that if we're too efficient with water, immediately wetlands start drying up. And that's a habitat issue that we'll have to deal with as things go along. But over time, if you don't get water recharging into that system, your groundwater then starts to be affected. So it is critical that we look at efficiency, and we can do that with technology, and it's amazing what we can get accomplished. But we need to be aware of what those consequences are so that we can start to address them. This is no indictment of what technology or efficiency can mean for us today, but it is an understanding about the responsibility we have to take on as humans when we use this technology as we go forward. So where is Wyoming in all of that? I'm going to argue that Wyoming is a crucible for enormous amounts of innovation and practical experience on the ground. We can talk about how valuable it is that we make sure that we don't get agricultural chemical runoffs into systems. We do see that summer temperatures are warming a little bit. We've had more cyanobacteria that have shown up in various water systems, and that's been problematic. It used to be in golf courses, now it's elsewhere. These are things that we're going to have to contend with. Now, our response to that, not Wyoming's, but our normal response to this is really about, and this is an argument about regulatory frameworks. Our response to that is to say, don't do that. You limit your use of chemicals, get more precise about it. All of these things are good. But we often talk in the energy sector where we're talking about emissions. We often talk about how emissions have to be stopped. And we used to talk about best available technology. So you looked at everybody in the competitive space and you'd say, we just got to do whatever the best person is doing there. And you look at our regulatory framework, it is really about compressing innovation, not opening it up. And in Wyoming, we've really tried to turn that corner, to talk more about what the outcomes we'd like to see are, and then let marketplace and innovation come into play so that, perhaps best available technology can be better. We've seen that over time. How do we incentivize that with a regulatory framework and make a difference? And I would say that there has been an adjustment, an evolution in the regulatory framework over time. I'll give you an example. When NEPA was first established, the National Environmental Policy Act, it was designed to sort of say, here's a big project. It's going to be in a complicated place. Take a look at what the things are and see if you can obviate against them. I would argue if we didn't have NEPA, the Alaska pipeline that functioned perfectly for years would never have functioned at all. That was an incredible effort to analyze. You're going across permafrost. There's all these things that happen with temperature changes, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to be putting flow through a pipeline. Pipeline's going to depreciate over time. Thank God we had NEPA because it helped us to analyze what things we could look out for over time. NEPA analysis today is less about that and much more about we just don't want you to do whatever that is you're planning to do, and we're going to hold it up so much that we aren't ever going to get anything accomplished. So if you're saying, gosh, in terms of what we need to do for this world, we need to figure out how we can do a better job with carbon. So the regulatory framework we have today says we don't like fossil fuels, we'll stop using them. And instead, what we're going to do is we're going to have a bunch more renewable development. That's going to be good, right? Ostensibly, that's good. But the challenge is it still takes you 12 years to get a transmission line put in place. If there's an urgency to solving these problems, our regulatory system has to be rethought and rekindled. So what I'm going to tell you about today is that here at the university and here in Wyoming, we have a willingness and an eagerness to work with best ideas, to develop those best ideas, to try to take the shackles off things and think about everything we're doing, from agriculture to finance. We just had this great conversation about blockchain and what the Wyoming stable token can do. These things need to be thought about in a fresh perspective, the fertility of the times that we live in. And that's my challenge to you. Let's not be completely enamored of the technology. It's really cool, and I love playing with it. But what we can do to improve our condition, may set things up for our future, that's what's really important. And that's what I'm so encouraged to hear from you about your ideas about how we can accomplish all of these missions. So I'll leave you with a quote from a guy who always frustrated me as his boss. He was my boss as his employee. A guy named Raymond Plank, who built Apache oil from a little well up north of Recluse. But he also was 70% of sun-kissed. Gated pipe, which is a new irrigation technique, was first developed by a company he had. He built the UCross Foundation, which offers artist-in-residence programs. And he used the UCross Foundation as a platform to be able to take food into Romania when they were starving. This was a guy who was not shackled by regulation or any, and he used a really quick funny story. He was sort of the principal lead in the fight that he took on with Enron. He felt that Enron was corrupt, and he felt that Enron was costing consumers a lot more. He wanted to have a direct relationship between the consumer and the producer. And on one of the calls, he said, I've got a 4-letter word for the folks at Enron. And everybody, it was on a national call, and everybody was going, oh no. Oh my God, what's he going to say next? Because he would say some really pretty spicy stuff. And he said jail. That's what it is. But what I will tell you is this has always stayed with me. He would make anyone who worked for him recite this. The capacity of the individual is limitless. Limitations are largely of habit, convention, acceptance of things as they are, fear, or lack of self-confidence. We cannot afford any of those now. The challenges we face are more monumental today than they've ever been in our time. But they are so much fun to address and to break down and to make bite-sized. That's what's cool about today. That's what's great about having you here. And thank God you have that vision. Thank you.
I made a strategic mistake sitting at the back. So thank you very much, Governor Gordon. I want to remind everyone about the sessions this afternoon. We have around an hour before we start up again at 1:30 with our next round of presentations and then a panel discussion. And so you have plenty of time to finish your lunch and wander around our beautiful campus and take advantage of the sunshine. And I think still be able to see the posters that are out in the room at the other end. So thank you all. See you back here at 1:30.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. But before we start the session, couple of announcements. I see quite a few of my students. Thank you for coming. Please meet Devin, and she will take your name. And I'll tell you what you need to do for the extra credit. But first, thanks for coming. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the co-chair of the program committee. Initially it all looks very vague, right? All you have are some names, titles, and abstracts, and you don't know how it's all going to gel together. But we did walk around during lunchtime, ask people for informal feedback, and we did hear a lot of good things. So let's continue that. We have a presentation session followed by a panel discussion. And without further ado, Dr. Zhao, please come in. He's the co-chair of the programming committee to put all these pieces together. Dr. Zhao, take it.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thank you. Obviously, I'm not the speaker, I'm glad that we have two wonderful speakers in this session. So the first speaker we have is Dr. Subashini. Her topic is explainable, physics-aware, data-driven deep learning for drone data analyze. So Dr. Subashini is currently a full professor at Avinashilingam Institute for Home Science and Higher Education for Women in India. She received her PhD degree from the Avinashilingam University in 2019. So Professor Subashini's research has spanned a large number of disciplines like image analysis, pattern recognition, neural network, and computational intelligence. Concurrently, she contributed to several fields of mathematics, especially nature-inspired computing. She has authored or co-authored 10 books, 12 book chapters, 1 monograph, 172 research articles. So she has 14 funded research projects worth about 46 million Indian currency from various funding agencies like Defense Research and Development Organization, Department of Science and Technology, SERB, and University Grants Commission. She is a member of IEEE Computer Intelligence Society and also the IEEE Chair for Women in Computing. Let's welcome Dr. Subashini.
So good afternoon, everyone. So first of all, I would like to thank you for the nice introduction. And my sincere thanks to Professor Ramesh and the authorities of University of Wyoming, and especially the President of School of Computing, Director of School of Computing, and all the other members of University of Wyoming for inviting us to this symposium. Basically, there is a small background for this kind of symposium and also about the talk in this symposium. See, we have a MOU signed in between our institution and Wyoming University for the past 10 years, but we couldn't make over here to meet the people here or to see what is the possibilities of having more number of joint programs or joint proposals or joint projects. So this time we could able to make a visit to the university, especially because of the symposium. So I would like to really thank the Director, School of Computing for arranging or to initiating this kind of get together for sharing the knowledge and the experience what we have in the front of drone data analysis. So this talk, it is about, before going to the talk, I just wanted to introduce or to say a few words about what and from where we are. We are from National University, myself and my colleague Dr. Krishnaveni is here. We are actually working under the Department of Computer Science, but we have a kind of setup called Center for Machine Learning and Intelligence, which is actually funded by the Indian government to promote AI and ML to the women students. So only 6 universities of India has been funded to promote AI and ML, starting from the women long back. And for the past 4 years, we are coordinating that center. And this center facility is a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary center which is working along with all the other departments, not just IT or computer science. It actually works with economics, botany, biochemistry, zoology, English, Tamil, business and commerce. With everyone we are working. So it is a multidisciplinary center. So we focus only on interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary rather than the computer science. So how technology can be applied to all these interdisciplinary nature of projects or process or the products. So that is what we are working. So in the same thought process, I actually coined this particular presentation, because this presentation is not just about drone data analysis or how the technology uses the drone, technology is being used for analysis. So this itself says something about the multidisciplinary, because the application I have taken as a flood classification. It can be for an environmentalist or anybody who is interested in to find or detect about or classify about flood from the imagery. So drone data analysis, another field, and neural networks. So for computer science and IT, it will be really useful or it will be interesting. But the main portion of this particular concept is physics aware data drone analysis. So there comes the physics. So even people from physics, they can actually take a note of that the physics concepts can be involved in neural networks. See, all these things, it's not just technology or computer science or whatever. It's not from actually the machines or the electronics, just electronics. It is from the nature. It is from the other concepts which are available already. Okay, in the introduction, they were telling like I'm expert in nature-inspired computing. So we worked on a lot of concepts which are inspired from the nature. lot more concepts are available which are inspired and taken into technology nowadays from physics or chemistry or for nature or biology. So now the concept physics-aware data-driven analysis is physics-aware neural networks. So how into neural networks the physics concept has been imbibed. Okay, that is what we are going to see now. So why I thought of introducing or talking about this particular concept is to show that there are multidisciplinary things which are available in the technology where we have to go and see and we have to apply. So the application can be anything. This PINN can be applied for any application. So with this introduction, I just wanted to show a small website, that means our website, the Center for Machine Learning and Intelligence. Okay, anyway, so let us not waste the time. If it is not coming, please visit our website because it gives you a lot of information like what are the kind of interdisciplinary projects or products, even the patterns we have are interdisciplinary with zoology, with optometry, all those things. So how together from each discipline, how we can work together for the cause of either the research community or for the society. That's the main aim of me showing this here. Thank you. So now coming to the topic. So it's explainable, physics-aware data-driven deep learning for drone data analysis. So what is this physics-informed neural network? So it's shortly called as PINN, and probably the computer science people may know what is neural networks, and also even few people know what is PINN. It is basically a neural network. Okay, the deep learning, the neural network concepts are very much used by any technology people here, even non-technology people are using for their application. So basic neural network, so know some basic science rules. And when the science rules, this PINN will talk about or know something on physics also, like gravity, heat, flow, fluid dynamics, all those things. It has some concepts or some information involved into that which are physical equations. So because of these physical equations, it makes better guesses about the image or whatever may be the data which can be never seen by normal neural network or normal data analysis. So basically the basic neural network which knows about something physics and make use of that physical equation to make smarter predictions more than the neural networks, or understand complicated problems better, because there are so much of complexity normally arises because of if the data is missing or there is some gaps in getting the data or images. In such cases, because of these physics equations, this can be more smarter way it can be predicted, or it can be addressed with the more complexities. And how it actually works. Learning from the data. Normally, the neural networks, it learns from the data, okay? And understanding the physics here, PINN, it understands the physics, so it knows something about the physics. And for example, temperature, how heat typically flows from hot to cold through walls, what will be the flow of the temperature, for example. So it has the knowledge of physics through the temperature, so the physics equations will be used here, and combining both together, the data, the information about the data, and also the nature of that particular data, through the physics equation. So it combines what it learned from the data with the physics it already knows. So for that, from where it makes the predictions. So making predictions or to understand the things better than a regular neural network and predict the future temperatures in different parts of the house, or understand how heat spreads in the walls. So for that, it will be using the physical equations. So what is the difference between normal neural network and physically informed neural networks? So a traditional neural networks, it understands what is the historical data. It takes up the data. So using the data, the neural network will be trained, and only the nature of the data will be there as an understanding to that particular neural network. So it recognizes the objects in images by analyzing the pixel patterns. For example, if the images we are taking and we are making use of the images to train that particular neural network, it will understand what is the pattern of pixels present in that particular image, and it will train itself and learn itself how the pattern has been formed, and then for the futuristic predictions, it will be using the same thing. But in PANN, it learns from data, but also integrate, as I mentioned, physics-based equations into the learning process. It learns how the temperature flows, or how the particular fluid is, or how the heat is, all those things. It will have that kind of information, which will be useful when dealing with the physical systems where laws are actually used, like conservation of energy or fluid dynamics, where that particular laws are very, very essential. And why this PANN has to be used for drone data analysis? Why? We are bringing this physics-informed neural network into drone data. Because more accurately it predicts, and better insights will be given, and very importantly, handle the imperfect data. So for accurate information, more accurate predictions, especially the complex environments are there. When you are taking data, the drone may be moving, or the drone may be in some kind of resolution, altitude. So the complex environments where just data might not be sufficient. And better insights, by combining the data and the physics behind that, it can provide deeper insights, helping the farmers or environmental scientists to make better decisions. And handling imperfect data for weather and obstacles or technical issues while doing weather forecast, or there may be any obstacle when taking up the data by the drone, which might cause some gaps between the data, whatever may be the image or the data. So the PANN can handle these gaps better by relying on the known physics. So it mostly it relies on the physical equations to fill up the gaps. So these are some of the reasons why we should go for such kind of neural networks. And some of the applications we have mentioned here, and to predict how water flows into the river. So it uses both the data and understanding of the gravity here. So a physics rule to make these predictions by analyzing the river flow changes due to the rainstorm. So the real world example is monitoring crop health. So we can collect the data from drones. With the use of drones, we can collect the data to monitor the crop health, which collects the data like images, which shows how green the crops are, indicating the health, temperature readings, and maybe even information about the moisture levels of the soil. So these things can be taken by the drone from the soil or as aerial images. For understanding the physics knows how temperature changes with the time, and how plants lose the water. When it's hot, plants might lose water and could look very less healthy. So combining these two data and also the physics from the drone, images showing the crop color and the temperature readings, and combines it with the understanding of the physics, how heat actually affects the plant health according to the timing. So uses these physics rules to better understand what's happening for the crop by means of monitoring that. So making predictions or deductions, predicting the crop health can be done with this, which understands the current weather conditions through the temperature data, and parts of the farm might need more water or nutrients or sudden drop in the plant health, which becomes the detection, and which can be easily detect the anomalies also, which happens because of the plant, what means the difference between the difference in the plant growth. So this improves the accuracy, which makes better predictions even when the drawn data is not perfect, and missed some spots. It may miss some spots over the entire field, and it may be unclear. So physics knowledge helps to fill the gaps which are happened because of the acquisition of the data, and still make accurate predictions. So some of the physics equations which are used in PANN, it incorporates especially all equations in neural network. It uses partial differential equations which describe the physical laws into their structure. The basic idea is it learns to predict certain quantities like temperature, velocity, pressure, all those things are governed by the physical equations, and relevant physics equations are to be used to calculate the additional loss term. So there will be always a loss term when we go for a prediction, or when we are going for a detection, there will be a loss which normally occurs with the data. So what will be the ground truth value or ground truth information which are to be predicted, which can be called as a target also. But when we train and when we make use of the testing, there will be a loss which normally normally occurs due to the data loss. Here, there is a thing called a physical loss also, which has to be considered, and put together the loss can be combined, and this loss will be again fed into the neural network to correct itself. The learning rate and the learning process will be again and again corrected to reduce the number of loss which are occurring due to the whatever, maybe the acquisition or some other things. So the loss will be reduced. So relevant physics equations are used to calculate the additional loss terms that penalize the network if it violates the physics principle. So the heat equation here, the temperature at the point and the time and thermal diffusivity will be calculated in the heat equations normally, and this describes how heat diffuses through a material over time. So this is how the physics equations, physical laws will be. And the architecture of this PANN, it will have 3 layers, input, output, and like any other neural network, it has all the 3 layers which takes its features like sensor data, initial conditions, and the main condition is boundary conditions, where we are going to make a small change over because of the physical laws. And hidden layers, this represents the neural network's capacity to learn the complex patterns from the input data, and the output layer will give the output, the target, the predicting the target values like temperature, velocity, and the pressure. Now, the physics-informed laws, it will be calculated, the network predictions are fed into these physics equations, and any deviations from the expected physical behavior contribute to the total loss. So as I told, there will be a loss for data as well as the loss because of the physics. So totally we will calculate the loss, and because of this calculation, total loss calculation, which will be fed again into the neural network to change its learning behavior, which ensures the model adheres to the known physical laws. And embedding the physics in the network, how this can be embedded? First, we will define as usual, like neural network, any other neural network, we will be defining a network and applying the physics equation. So instead of just minimizing the difference between the predicted and observed data, normally, which actually focuses upon only the data loss, PAN also minimizes the difference between the predicted values and the physics equation. So there will be a difference. Loss of data will be calculated like network prediction minus observed data, and total loss will be equal to data loss plus the physical loss. So data loss measures how well the network prediction matches the trained data, while physics loss measures how well the network's prediction satisfies the heat equation. Whatever equation may be, it may be heat or it may be water or whatever may be, how it actually predicts and how it satisfies the particular heat equation. So the network will be trained in such a way that it has to adjust the parameters to minimize the loss and making sure that the prediction satisfies that particular equation whatever we have used. So training that PANN, so dual training process will be there, and because of that more robust and physically accurate model will be defined. And there normally in any neural network there will be a boundary condition, maybe number of epochs, how much they are using, or there will be some condition. Besides that condition only, that neural network will be working. So these conditions are added to the loss function as boundary loss equal to the prediction minus the boundary. So that boundary loss also will be calculated. So that those will be used as the stoppage condition for the entire training. So these are some of the physics equations. So if these equations are understood well, and if we know how to apply these equations into the neural network, any kind of applications can be used. For example, fluid dynamics. So the motion of fluid substances such as air or water can be governed by this equation, Navier-Stokes equation. This equation is particularly useful for analyzing the air flows around drones, predicting wind patterns, or understanding water flow in rivers and lakes monitored by drones. So for any application, you can make use of this, which is related to the fluid. And if a drone is equipped with a sensor to measure the wind speed or water flow, this equation helps in processing and predicting the flow dynamics. And thermodynamics, heat transfer. So this describes how heat diffuses through the medium over time in a wall, inside a room, or inside a particular infrastructure. So drones equipped with the sensors, which with the thermal cameras, use this equation to monitor the temperature variations in crops, buildings, and other environments, and helps in interpreting the thermal images for applications like detecting plant stress or heat leaks in infrastructures. And another equation is electromagnetism, meant for electromagnetism, Maxwell's equation. So describes how a time-varying magnetic field produces an electric field, and overall describe how electric and magnetic field propagate and interact. So using this equation, we can use it for applications like geophysical surveys where drones measure the magnetic fields. And next equation is for motion, kinematic motion. Equation for motion. So it describes the relationship between the force applied to an object, its mass, and the resulting acceleration. It can be applied for ensuring the stable flight paths, analyzing the data related to drone dynamics in various conditions. And yet we have other equations also. Conservation of mass, if you use continuity equation, conservation of mass equation. So it describes the conservation of mass in the fluid, and where the rho represents the density and u is the velocity field. And this is useful for analyzing how a fluid density changes in the space and time, especially in environmental monitoring such as tracking the pollution or sediment transport in water bodies. And radiative transfer equation, this is used for propagation of radiation in light conditions through a medium, or considering absorption or emission of radiation. So this can be used to analyze how light interacts with the atmosphere, vegetation, or water bodies, affecting the quality and interpretation of the image. Some more equations like potential flow theory, implicit flow, and optical flow equation for computer vision. This is especially used when we are going for image analysis. So this actually explains or describes the apparent motion of brightness patterns which normally appear in the imaging. And because of applying this equation, we can ensure that the tracking movement in video feeds, monitoring, traffic, wildlife, or any other dynamic elements in the environment can be detected well or monitored well. And the last equation is Snell's law for refraction, how light bends when it passes one medium into another. So relevant drones with optical sensors can be used for this kind of applications, which will takes the refraction when analyzing the images taken over the water bodies or other surfaces. So these are some of the basic physical equations which will actually govern the particular neural networks, and also all these applications which are where we are applying this neural network. So as an example, we have taken flood classification, which is classified. The flood images has been taken from a data set, FloodNet 2021, which is a high resolution aerial imagery for post-flood scene understanding. And the damages caused by Hurricane Harvey has been acquired, and it is available in FloodNet. It is openly available. And here we have used for FloodNet, image classification and semantic segmentation. The data set was split into 60% training, 20% validation, and 20% testing. For data pre-processing, it predicts whether the aerial images are flooded or not. Only classification we have done. We have not gone for the monitoring. So because it is just a classification, we have applied only one equation. If you want to monitor, then all the physics-related equations, 3 equations which are related to that, because it should be continuous, and we have taken only the images, not the video. For monitoring, it needs the video to be actually analyzed. So no need here, as it is a data set which are already available. No pre-processing is required, and we have not done any pre-processing. So these are some of the physics equations where we can apply into the PINN. One is for Naive-Stokes equation for finding out the fluid's dynamics, and this is for mass conservation, how continuously it flows, and shallow water equations to find out the depth of the water. These 3 equations are actually related to monitoring the flood, but we have taken only the fluid dynamics to understand what is the mass or what is the boundary condition of the water body where in the particular images. So the purpose of this is describe the motion of the fluid substances such as water, and are fundamental in modeling water flow and the flow dynamics. And the application is you can model the flow of data over different terrains, helping to predict how water will spread during a flood event. So this is just an image where we can see most of the layers, and it's not actually very clear. We have the input layer, and we can take the drone data which has been given input into the input layer. Hidden layers we will have, and the physical layer where we will physics layer where we have the Naive-Stokes physical equation, and we will be having the layers. Okay, so again it will be input after training. It will check up the data loss and also the total loss using the physics and whether the boundary condition is met or not, and if the loss, which is because of the physics equation, whatever we have applied as Navier-Stokes, it will find out whether there is a huge difference. If it is not, it will go, otherwise it will again feed into the neural network to reduce the loss. So we have actually, for comparing, we have used CNN, convolutional neural network, where in any neural network it will be used, convolutional neural network and physics informed neural network. So this is the equation, and we have given the steps like the basic CNN with input layer, like 224 by 224 by 3 image dimensions we have taken, and some of the layers we have explained here. And in physics informed neural network, we have calculated the physics informed loss to the main loss function with small weight. So this calculated the gradients of the model's prediction with respect to all trainable variables in the model, and this computes the mean squared value of all the gradients, which essentially measures the smoothness of the model and prediction with respect to the parameters. Because of this, it encourages the smoothness in the model's prediction. So shallow water equation has been used, which are derived from the Navier-Stokes equation. This Navier-Stokes equation, it has the shallow water equation, shallow water quality, where it finds out the flood, what is the quantity of the flood we have. So by that we can identify whether the flood has been appeared there or not. So this is the equation we have used. And these are some of the results. So you can see these are some of the images we have taken from the data set. We can see some of the pictures are not with the flooded with the flood, and see there is no flood, and here also no floods are there. And we have the classification done by the normal convolutional neural network and by the physics informed neural network. So from the results we can understand that PAN classification, it is actually giving more kind of good results than the normal neural network, because it takes up the physics laws and it subtracts that and it finds what is the difference, and it go back again to train, and finally it gives the better results than any other neural network. So you can find from that. And you can see the losses also. So the model accuracy is loss. For CNN training and CNN validation, it is in the first legend, and PANN it is green. So the loss is always lesser than the loss happened by the. So even if it is not giving very high accuracy, even if it gives a lesser of accuracy, the loss of information or the loss which happened by the neural network when classifying is very, very lesser than the normal neural network. That is the thing which we can understand from the model accuracy and also the model loss. The accuracy may not be very high. If we go for many, this is actually, we have taken not the entire data set. It is, the entire data set is not taken. We have taken only a sample data to understand how the PANN works over the other neural networks. So the model accuracy may not be more than 90% or something which is very higher, but it is more than the PANN. But we have to look into the model loss. When compared with the CANN, PANN is giving very, very less loss. So this is what we have given in the numbers also. So you can, this is explainable AA. So any neural network, we may not know how it actually works. So normally this is used, this is actually taken by using the LIME. So LIME normally takes up the pixels which are related to that particular model training, and takes up the pixels and it understands how it works, and based on that it can give that it is not flooded. Okay, for CNN, it couldn't take up the particular pixels, but here it has taken, and that's what we have given the classification not flooded with the confidence level of that particular model over the LIME is 0.88, while it is in CNN model, it is 59% only. So from that, we can understand that the explainability of that particular model is more than the normal neural network model. That is what we have given here. So what are the limitations of this PANN? So higher data requirement. As other neural networks, data requirement will be very, very more, and it is sometimes we have to integrate which physical equation is required here, and integrating that physical equation into the neural network is very, very important, and if any imperfection is there, it will not work out or it will not give proper results. And loss function optimization. So these are some of the avenues where the physics people, I mean the researchers who are working in physical equations, who are working in optimization, computational intelligence, all work together to find out optimized mechanism to reduce the loss function optimization. And normally in neural network it happens the hyperparameter tuning and data set imbalance, all these related to computer science, and higher complexity in PANN. When we go for, because suppose if it is to be monitored, as I was mentioning, this is just flood classification. Suppose I wanted to monitor the flood, because why we have taken this particular example is very recently in our area there was a huge flood, and it actually devastated the life of more than 1,000 people in a night. Okay, so in such cases, the accurate information or finding out a particular detection or classification is very, very important. But for monitoring the flood, just one equation will not be sufficient. So we have to take up more than 1 or 3 or all this information, physics equations or physics laws has to be incorporated into the neural network, which becomes more complex. So higher complexity in PANN and limited data augmentation. Sometimes for monitoring and all, data augmentation will be necessary, but only limited data augmentation may be available. So these are some of the limitations which I wanted to put forth so that the science community can work on this further. So thank you, and any questions, you're welcome. Yes, please. Sorry, actually, your voice is not audible to me, and I couldn't understand the question. So, shall I come and take the question? Yeah.
Sorry, I can speak up now. I'm just wondering if it's more of, if there's a higher data requirement and your data may not be, say, representative of what is actually happening. And then, for example, the sensors are in the valley, and when we're looking for snow that's on top of a mountain, and we're looking for that, like to see how much snow is accumulating, would that like bias this algorithm, I guess, more if it's more data?
We are going to operate the physics equation which are which rules or which have the laws related to that, then the bias can be reduced. For neural network, any kind of bias or negative bias can be addressed by the algorithm inbuilt mechanism. So this physics equation will stop up that kind of mechanism and it will give more accurate results. So what kind of motion or law, what you are looking into, that should be appropriate. Yes.
We have time for one more question due to the time limit.
Yes, please.
Go ahead, Ben.
Yes, so clear flooding example where you're talking about how both the input is the imagery, but then the loss function is informed both by label being and also kind of correct physics answer. Can you talk about in the training process there, based on that image information, how do you calculate what the correct answer should be?
Yeah. So while training the neural network, usually these are the targets or these are the objects you have to detect. Okay. So if there is a big difference, then that will be a loss. So that is data loss. Suppose if you are giving a physical law to that, and you are giving a boundary condition also, and you say that this is the boundary condition where this physical law is applicable. If there is a difference, then it says that it is a physical law. You have to consider both laws together, and that again it is against the neural network, and it's the tuning parameter or those things to be happen. It has to be done to reduce the loss. So during the training process, again training will be given to the neural.
So where does the ground truth physics answer?
Yeah. Ground truth, yes. Of course, we have to consider ground truth also.
Okay. Let's thank Dr. Subashini.
Thank
Sorry.
you once again for all the listening and the questions, and also the opportunity given to me for presenting the idea here in the symposium. Thank you so much.
There's a little souvenir for you from us. Thank you. It was a great talk. I want to thank Dr. Subashini. We have our second speaker who's working in the drone control area, Dr. Chen. So Dr. Chen is currently an associate professor at Oakland University in Michigan. He received his PhD degree in electrical engineering with minor in computer science from Iowa State University in 2014. He was with Idaho National Lab from 2014 to 2016 as a research scientist, and with General Motors from 2017 to 2020 as a senior control engineer. His research interests include advanced control and optimization, model predictive control, artificial intelligence, stochastic hybrid systems with applications in automobile and energy systems. So Dr. Chen is a recipient of the prestigious NSF Career Award from the National Science Foundation and many other projects funded by NSF and NIST. He is also an editor for IEEE International Conference on Robotics and Automation, American Control Conference, and IFAC Symposium on Advances in Automobile Control. He is currently also a senior member of IEEE, and his topic is coordination of multi-agent systems through reconfigurable model predictive control and decentralized reinforcement learning. Dr. Chen, the floor is yours.
Okay, all right, thanks for the introduction, and thanks to the committee for having me here to talk about our research on the coordination of multi-agent systems through reconfigurable model predictive control and the decentralized reinforcement learning. Again, my name is Jun Chen. I'm currently with Oakland University, and we are located in Michigan. When I go to conference, I always want to emphasize that, because whenever I say I'm from Oakland University, people assume I'm from California. And there was a couple times people thought we are located in New Zealand, but we are not. We are located in Detroit Metro in Michigan. And we are actually surrounded by the big three US automotive company, General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, or AKA Chrysler. So that's why you will find my talk, you will find my research has a lot of automotive flavor in it, even though my research is generally on the control theory, on the multi-agent system, but just because of our funder, our sponsor, and our students' interests, we put some automotive flavor in it. So my talk is divided into 4 parts. I will give you some motivation slides. Then I will talk about the reconfigurable MPC for formation control. Then I will talk about the multi-agent reinforcement learning for with a variable agent. Then the talk will be concluded with the conclusion. So I steal this slides from my undergraduate control course. So if you are in this area, I apologize because these slides wouldn't give you any new information. But if you are outside of engineering, outside of control theory, treat these slides as control 101. So in classical closed-loop feedback control system, we have the desired output response up front. In the context of drone, it could be like the desired trajectory you want the drone to follow. Then we have a process, or we call it plant, which produce an actual trajectory. And then in the upfront, we compare these two, which produce the error, which is essentially the difference between those two. And then the idea of control theory, control engineer, is we try to design as fancy as possible of control algorithm so that we can minimize the error term. In other words, we want the trajectory that produced by drone, robot, vehicle to closely follow the desire, or closely follow the reference. There are quite a few techniques we can use to design such a controller. So PID, which is the most popular one in industry, and which if you take undergraduate control course, you will definitely learn it. Then we have root shaping, leak-lag compensation. Then we have some modern control theory like robust control, nonlinear control. Then we have some post-modern control technique like model predictive control, or MPC, or some AI-based like reinforcement learning. my research and this talk will be mostly focused on MPC and reinforcement learning. So just one slide. I apologize, I put some equation there. I know it's afternoon session. Sorry for making you bored. But what model predictive control does is it essentially solves an optimization problem in real time. We don't do things in offline, we do things in real time. At each time step, we are trying to, given a reference, like for example, the orange trajectory here, we are trying to find a control sequence, like for example, in the whatever blue or purple line here, so that the prediction over the short-term future closely follow the reference. So that's what we do in the MPC. Once we find such a sequence, which is over the next, let's say, next 10 seconds, next 20 seconds, but we do not apply all of them. We only apply the first element, and then when time advances for 1 second, we do the optimization all over again. So that is why MPC sometimes it's called receding horizon optimization. So MPC is really good. What's the challenge of implementing MPC in drone? Or what's the challenge, or even more fundamental question, what's the challenge of implementing MPC in embedded environment? So embedded environment is very limited in terms of the computing power. But AI and the advanced control like MPC requires tons of computing resource that the embedded system like drone may not provide. So for example, sometimes we need to solve a optimization problem with over 100 optimization variables, and we want to solve that in real time. But the production-grade electronic control unit or the production-grade computing unit, think of it that way, has very, very low clock speed, like 48 megahertz to 200 megahertz, compared to the 10 gigabyte, 30 gigabyte of your laptop. This is like a very, very naive. And also the embedded system has a very limited memory as well. And this issue could be potentially mitigated by using a cloud. People are talking about cloud-based control. In that case, the embedded controller no longer does computation. It acts as an interface. It collects the measurement from the drone, send it to the cloud, and the cloud, which is, think of it as a high computing unit, do all the computation, send the result to the controller, then controller implement it. This could be one possible solution, but of course the same issue persists. We cannot really assume the cloud computing to be unlimited, and also it incurs some cost to use the cloud computing. We may need to pay tons of millions of dollars to, let's say, Amazon or Google. No offense here, but to me, it's not a viable solution. So therefore, scaling up reinforcement learning and the model predictive control for large multi-agent system remains unsolved, and it is the primary objective of my research. So in the first, in the first part, we consider a multi-agent system with n agents. Each agent, we assume the dynamic to be linear. So again, sorry for the equation there. We further assume that the dynamics of each agent are decoupled. So in other words, their dynamic do not interfere with each other, but their coupling happens through the constraint. And agents are coordinated to achieve a common objective. So one potential example is let's say drone formation control, where when the drone are a little bit away from each other, the interference can be temporarily ignored. But at the same time, we don't want drone to be too close. We don't want it to be too far away from each other. So that's what the constraint means in here. And another example, of course, it's the autonomous vehicle formation control as well. In the conventional MPC, what we do is we formulate like I said earlier, we formulate an optimization problem, and here we assume all the cost functions are strictly convex and quadratic. You don't have to know what that means if it doesn't make sense to you. Then the problem here is that, let's say we have 10 agents, and we are trying to predict 10 seconds ahead of time. And each agent, if it's drone, then it has 4 control input, 4 thrust force. In that event, we have 10 multiplied by 10 multiplied by 4, we have 400 optimization variables that we need to find in real time. So the centralized approach is really not tractable in this case. In the literature, people try to use distributed MPC where the computation gets loaded to each individual agent. However, in this case, the distributed MPC cannot achieve the global optimal, and it requires information exchange between agents, so it incurs high communication costs. So in our work, we propose a reconfigurable MPC. In other words, at each time step, instead of finding 400 variables, we do not optimize all of them. We only optimize a subset of them. That's what the meaning of WT in here. So instead of 400, let's say we only optimize 40 of them. And for the agents that are not included in the optimization, we use the previous sequence. If you remember in one of the slides, I talked about we find the sequence, but we only use one of them. Then for the agents that are not selected for optimization, we use previous sequence. If all the elements are used, then the last one is held there. And which subset to optimize can be changed from time step to time step. And our goal is to design the rule to select this subset so that all the agents are updated frequently enough so that none of them are left out. And also the whole system is stable. And also, since we are only updating a subset of them, there is some performance loss, and we want to be able to quantify that performance loss. So I guess the key takeaway of this slide is by assuming the feasible region to be convex polyhydrogen, we are able to have a formula here. You don't even have to memorize it. You don't even have to read it. We have a nice theory to quantify the performance loss. And also, we are able to prove the stability in the Lyapunov sense when we take the cost function as the Lyapunov function. And then for the performance loss, we also show from simulation that even though there's performance loss, but if you look at the plot there, as the time goes on and on after the transient process dies, the relative performance loss kind of converge to zero, meaning we are able to achieve as good as the centralized MPC. Then we run the simulation using ground vehicle. We did not run it in drone, just to be clear. We run it on the ground vehicle, which is a little bit simpler than the drone. We have only a 2D plane instead of the 3D space. And we can show that the proposed approach kind of sacrifices the transient dynamic a little bit. That's what it shows in the plot here. But what is exciting is that the proposed method is using anywhere between 1% to 20% of the total computation compared to the conventional MPC. So we really reduce the computation by up to 80% at least. So that piece of work is focused on the motion control level. We are trying to coordinate the agents' formation control. In the next couple of slides, I will talk about how to use reinforcement learning, not to do the motion control, but a little bit upper level to do the decision making. The scenario that we consider is we assume we have a fleet of agents that needs to pass through a narrow space. And one example can be a bunch of civilian drones that need to pass through a gate in here. And the order of the agent in here, meaning the order that gets passed through this tunnel, can impact the safety and it can impact the system level efficiency. So the goal here is try to come up with the optimal way for them to organize and pass through this tunnel in here. And of course, similar situation occurs in the ground traffic, where when you have two lanes and it gets reduced to one lane, what's the optimal way to pass through that reduction point? And conventional multi-agent reinforcement learning does not apply in here because, for example, if the number of agents in this area, in the area that we need to make a decision can be time varying. It can be changed from time to time. For example, the one that's leftmost there, it's not part of the decision making. And also this one in here, its position is almost guaranteed. There's no point to have other drone to fly ahead of it. And there's no point for this one to delay. So its position is guaranteed. It's not part of the decision making. So in other words, the number of agents that we need to consider is time varying. And also for each agent, its surrounding, its local observation is time varying. The number of local observation is time varying as well. So for example, for this agent, it doesn't have any agent nearby, so its observation is 0. For the one in the middle, it has 2 other drones nearby, so it needs to observe the other 2. for the one down there, the drone need to only observe the one other agent. So for each agent, the number of observation is time varying as well. So that makes this problem very, very challenging. So the solution we propose is rather than the conventional reinforcement learning architecture, we add a shared attention network. Shared attention network is a technique used in the language processing. When people talk, the sentence can be longer, can be shorter, and the shared attention is it's used to detect which word in that sentence, in a variable length sentence, we should focus on. And we use this technique, and we are able to show that we cut the training time by 50%. So in the plot here, the red one is our proposed method, and then the blue one is the conventional multi-agent reinforcement learning, which requires twice training time as ours. And we use the centralized training, decentralized execution, meaning each agent has its own policy network, each drone has its own policy network. While we use a centralized critique to monitor to evaluate the global rewards. And in terms of rewards function, we investigate several of them. One is the global speed. All the agents, whether they are part of the decision process or not, we count their speed. Their speed contribute to this reward function. Safety is contributed by all agents as well. Then we have 3 local rewards. One is local speed. Only those agents that participate in the decision process, we count its rewards function, which makes sense because the other thing, we are not controlling it, so we don't worry about they are doing good or not. Local drag. Drag is the change in the acceleration, and also local energy consumption. So again, this framework is quite generic. We can use it for any multi-agent system, any multi-robot system, any multi-drone system. But because of our funder, we simulated it in the ground autonomous vehicle case, where we have 2 lanes and it gets reduced to 1. And we can show that the result here consistently performs the conventional merging trajectory. And also we introduced several fairness index to measure the goodness of each reward function. So the fairness simply is saying that if you are currently in this position and you get cut by other vehicle, then it's not fair to you, right? And the other lane fairness is saying that ideally after passing the reduction point, we want the vehicle to rotate between the top lane and the bottom lane. We don't want to see a large stride of vehicle passing through and all the other vehicles are waiting. So that's what the fairness means in here. So I think we can still look at this video. So before training, we use a random way. We can see that the vehicle on the bottom here keep merging early, which makes this piece of land wasted. So, and after a while, we can say that the agent learns that we need to come up to this point and then merge. But of course, sometimes they can merge earlier, but they do not, and the consequence is a lot of vehicle pile up in here. And after a while, we can see that they can merge at the best timing, but still sometimes there is some traffic slowdown, causing some congestion, like what's happening there. And then I think this is the best model. We can see that the vehicle knows to come closer, but if they seize any opportunity, they just merge. So just to sum up, the proposed methods are promising in implementing advanced control algorithm in the embedded environment where we do not have infinite amount of computing power. And the future work is trying to push the limit of electrified and the intelligent system via both AI and the MPC. So in particular, we would like to do, so in previous work, we use centralized training, which still consume a lot of offline computation power. We would like to reduce that by using decentralized training as well. And also, we would like to use learning from demonstration for autonomous system, motion planning, and the control. And of course, most importantly, you realize that most of my work is generated in the multi-agent system, but in terms of simulation, because of our funder, because of our student interest, I use the ground vehicle as the example, and I would like to learn from you guys about the drone and how we can adapt this work, apply this work to the drone system. With that, I welcome any questions.
What's the, I guess, it's hard to word it, but what's the desired practical application on this? Is it, package delivery is what we think is going to be the most, or light shows, or what application?
So two pieces, right? On the formation control, so I guess light show will be light show, or or sometimes if you want to explore, let a drone fly over the unfamiliar terrain, so autonomously. That could be another scenario as well. Package delivery, of course, yes, but most of the time package delivery is single agent. Single agent. So then the computation power may not be as challenged. And of course, my group work on the single agents as well. We try to make the computation as faster as well. But whatever I present here makes more sense when we have multiple drone or multiple agent. So in that case, single agent package delivery may not be the best scenario that for this for whatever I present here.
I was just thinking when they all come back to their hub, that's where that would be the most practical.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
That's where the congestion.
Yeah, that's a good point. Or if you have, I think I read somewhere, we do not use drone to do all the delivery. You use it for the last mile, and you can have a mobile truck, and then the drone fly from the truck, do the last mile, come back. And I agree. Yeah, in that scenario, it would be the congestion point. Maybe when they returning to the truck. Yep. Good point. Very good point. Thank you. Any other questions? Then I guess it's for coffee break.
Hey, thank you. So this is our little souvenir.
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
So welcome back. This is the next session for today. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Kirby from Colorado State University, who is in the program committee, and he will be moderating the session on disaster response and environmental impact.
Thanks very much. I'm delighted to be here in Wyoming. I'll ask you a personal question to start out. How many of you were here in 1989? 1, 2, 3. Okay, 4, 5, 6. Okay, how many of you saw my interview talk in the Department of Mathematics in 1989? Okay, so we're at 0. Okay. Yeah, so I'm revealing a fun fact about myself. I interviewed here for a position in the Department of Mathematics in 1989, and also at CSU, and you can guess where it all ended up. I'm a professor in math at CSU, joint in computer science, and also now a director of the Data Science Research Institute. And we are really excited to start talking with folks here at Wyoming about data and applications to drones. We have pleasure of having been invited by School of Computing to participate in a research proposal. Now that was funded by the National Science Foundation, and this is a really exciting opportunity for us to collaborate here and have ongoing discussions. And we're already, after half a day, delighted to have new conversations about things that we might do together. So that's a kind of an advertisement about where we're we're headed. Also, apologies for the crimes that mathematicians have committed over the years. This morning, we heard about the integrals that you had to perform, and I'm here to apologize on behalf of all professors of mathematics. Although not all would agree, probably would say, why did you leave the course? Anyway, we are doing mathematics in a new way. I do geometric data analysis, so we try to understand shape in data. And that's taken us to understand, or try to understand, how neural networks perform, particular geometries of learning. How do you understand the shape of data, the shape of neural networks in a sense that we describe mathematically. So today we heard a lot of really great talks. Talks about data, talks about drones, talks about AI, and talks about computing. These were clearly, they're all interfaced, they're all integrated, and we're seeing that. And we saw the governor of the state say something which I thought was, I say this a lot, I'm happy to hear other folks say it as well. This is a really exciting time, okay? I mean, it is one of the, sometimes I'm a little embarrassed to say this because I've been around for a long time. This is probably the most exciting time in my research career, right? You have computing. The computer that the University of Wyoming is just about to get funding for, or has funding for, is rated at a speed, okay, that's faster than the fastest computer in 2010. So if you look at the top 500 list in 2010, this computer that they're obtaining is faster than that. So you can imagine that this is transformative to the types of things that we can do, all right? I used to write code many years ago, and I stopped working with neural nets because they were just too slow. But clearly, that's no longer the case, right? You are seeing people talk about neural nets with billions and billions of parameters. I've heard recently that there is a fundraising going on for a $1 trillion neural net, new GPT. So this is really going, people have talked about electricity and how this is the new electricity. Do you believe that? I don't know. We'll see. Time will tell. This could be just a giant lookup table. It could also be emergent knowledge. We'll know in the time. But let's focus now on drones, and in particular, disaster response and environmental impact. We're all thinking about that, particularly with regards to wildfires. In Colorado, we have one right now that's under control. It's 5% contained, but we're keeping an eye on it. So the work that you're doing here is incredibly important. I just want to emphasize that. So now I'll turn to the panelists and give them a chance to introduce themselves.
So I am Melissa Reynolds. I am the Faculty Director of Core Facilities and Infrastructure in the Office of the Vice President for Research. And my actual research on a daily basis actually has to do with medical devices. I am really happy to be here. Michael and I are working pretty strategically together on high-performance computing at Colorado State right now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Peter Nelson. I am an associate professor in civil and environmental engineering at CSU. I am a hydraulic engineering geomorphologist. That's what my research focuses on. And I think I'm here today because a lot of my research I've worked on for the last, 5 or 6 years is focused on post-wildfire hydrology, flooding, and erosion. And we've really been doing a lot of drone-based data collection for that. So I'm happy to talk about that and other stuff that I've picked up along the way.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maddie Zimmerman. I am from the University of Vermont, so took quite a ways to get here, but excited to be here. And excited to see the different types of trees and rocks and things. I was admiring those today. And it's like a much better temperature than it is in Vermont. It's like rainy and cold this time of year, so it's lovely to be here. I am a UAS specialist with the University of Vermont Spatial Analysis Lab, and my day-to-day really differs. I do everything from UAS flights, and we do a lot of environmental and natural resource monitoring. We do like volume estimation sometimes for renewable energy, that sort of thing, riparian buffer, like overviews, collecting lots of data related to the environment. I have about 5 years of UAS experience. We also do a lot of work with Assure. The University of Vermont is a core member of Assure, which is the Alliance for System Safety of UAS through Research Excellence. We're one of, I want to say, 17 core members. There's 30 members total in this consortium. And we do a lot of work with training first responders on how to use UAS. And that is something that my day-to-day, especially in the summer when it is nice in Vermont, that is something that I do very, very frequently. So, yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Sean Castaneda. I am a former Marine. I served from 2005 to 2014, which is where I got my introduction to GIS. I was an imagery analyst, so I specialized in analysis of imagery from spy planes, spy satellites, spy drones, those kinds of things. And recently I got my master's degree here at the University of Wyoming in GIS, and I also have a master's certificate in UAS. And now I'm a PhD student here in transportation engineering.
All right, great, thanks very much. The way the panel session will work is I'll pose a few questions to the panelists, and hopefully that will generate some discussion amongst the panelists. And then when we run out of steam, we'll turn over to the audience and ask the audience to pose questions to the panelists. So I'll go ahead, and I have a list of questions we've prepared, and I'll throw one out, and anybody in the panel can, whoever's first to hit their buzzer can do that. So how about real-time decision making? How do you ensure that real-time data from drones translates into actionable insights during a crisis?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take a stab at this. So again, Maddie Zimmerman, University of Vermont. Our state of Vermont, which the University of Vermont is actually pretty similar size to University of Wyoming, much smaller state though, up in the Northeast. We experienced a 100-year flood event last summer in July of 2023 that completely inundated the state's capital. Many towns across the rural state of Vermont were half or entirely underwater. It was, I mean, we experienced some flooding in Vermont, but nothing to that degree. And that was an extremely rare and unprecedented event. And our lab, which has UAS capabilities, along with a couple other state departments, one other state department that at the time had UAS capabilities, we responded to this flooding event. And our team of 5 people, 5 full-time staff on our UAS team responded and conducted over 130 flights within a period of 6 weeks, collecting data of just flooding across the state, and tried to collect a lot of data at high water marks for documentation purposes, as well as to inform the state emergency management on, what was going on the ground, and trying to get them really rapid data products. Something that we found that was really valuable was trying to ensure that the emergency management understood what UAS products to ask for, and kind of bridging that communication gap that sometimes exists between folks that are using UAS in their daily activities and kind of more management or administrative folks who don't necessarily know what can be produced with drones. So making sure that we were communicating very quickly once we realized that this would be something to respond to with drones. We were saying, we can collect oblique imagery, we can collect mapping imagery, video live stream from a UAS controller can be streamed into the emergency management office in the state for situational awareness, for a search and rescue response, that sort of thing. So I think that event, as well as, unfortunately, this July in 2024, we had another very large flooding event. Hopefully it doesn't become routine. I think we're now preparing for it to become routine, unfortunately, but it was thankfully a lower scale event. But again, we saw the lessons learned of being able to take, especially like images and quickly processed like data products from our drones and pushing those to decision makers, pushing them to web services like ArcGIS Online, so they could be integrated into things like FEMA SARCOP and be used by FEMA for disaster declaration. So that was some firsthand experience that we had with, actually, well, one, in 2023, kind of struggling and rushing to figure out how to get some of these data products to who needed to be making the decisions and doing the disaster declaration, but kind of found our workflows, I guess, a bit in the past year or so.
I'd like to add a few things on this. Those were all good, very good points. But I think my main answer to this is mobile GIS solutions, being able to get data to the responders at the, for lack of a better term, the front lines. However, before we get there, we have to think about planning and the operations and having a little bit of foresight of what an operation might look like. If with a little bit of thought and a little bit of planning, trying to understand what fire crews would need, what flood crews would need, emergency responders trying to get vehicles to affected areas, thinking about how are you going to relay that information to that ambulance driver, to that the firefighters, those kinds of things. And then you also have to think about the priority. What is the most imminent priority versus a little midterm priority versus long-term priority? And that all falls under planning, right? Getting together with your local governments, whether you're state officials, county officials, and trying to understand what their plans are for a future event versus trying to implement new strategies in the midst of a crisis. And I'll leave it open to the other panelists before I go back to my last point here.
I just want to really put an exclamation point on what Sean was saying, because all of the great tools and technologies that were described today are wonderful, but if they're not used appropriately and at the right time and place, yeah, you have, like I like to say with instruments, you get a number, you get an image, but what does that mean and how does it help us? The other thing I'd like to point out is from this morning, I think there was a question of, so, if there is an emergency, would it be helpful for all of you to launch your drones at the same time? And the answer is, I think I heard a pretty clear no, don't do that, please. And so I think this falls into what Sean was saying about, well, when you're planning, where are the right times and places and kind of data that's coming in that suggests that this is the right time and place, right? And then how do you actually correspond with the boots on the ground and so forth to say, yes, these are the conditions where this will be helpful versus these are the conditions that you adding help right now really isn't going to be helpful. And what I would say is that we've learned a lot because of all the different types of national disasters and other things around the country, that we have been better working as teams, right, between the universities, the cities, emergency response at the federal level. And so I think all of those coming together to try to figure out where is the best use and the best time becomes really imperative.
And one thing that I'll briefly add is, touching on what was said earlier, I think ensuring communication between the folks who are doing the response and folks who might be collecting data or imagery with drones is really important. And oftentimes there's a disconnect between, I think, knowledge of what drones can actually do and what they can't do, the conditions under which they're actually able to be operated. I've been asked by Forest Service rangers if I can take a drone out during an intense rainstorm and document flooding as it's happening. And the answer to that is no, because the drone is not rated to fly in that sort of condition. It would be totally unsafe anyway and not produce usable data. But I think establishing expectations of what you can and can't do is something that we need to work on.
Any final comments?
Well, I said I did, but he actually just commented on them. I have a whole list here of hype, right? Like managing the hype versus the realities. And so as we come across them, I'll refer back to this list.
Good. So next question is very dear to me, data management and analysis. So what are some of the biggest challenges in managing and analyzing data during disaster response? And how can drone-enabled applied computing help to overcome these challenges? This is handing the mic over. Who wants to go first? Peter?
I'll start. I mean, data management analysis is a huge issue, even not in a disaster. You know, I don't know how many terabytes of data we've collected over the years doing just the sort of small-scale research projects that my team's worked on, but it's a lot. And I've had this whole other sort of side project of trying to figure out how I can effectively store and manage and share the data that we've been collecting and then processing it. And so, you know, real time, I don't know, I think we might want to be looking at cloud-based solutions and distribution. That's definitely not my area of expertise, but it's a big thing to consider. I went to graduate school in the Bay Area, and I was in a geology program at the time, and folks in my department, one of the big research projects that they were working on was earthquake early warning systems, which I think is kind of comparable. It's not using drone data necessarily, but taking all these readings from seismometers around the country and around the world and around California in particular, and doing really rapid processing once they receive those initial waves of earth shaking, getting that information into the communications network and pinging people's phones and stopping trains and doing all this at like a very rapid response rate is, I think, the type of thing that we might be able to start looking at once we have actionable data that we collect with UAVs and other disaster systems.
Comments on data? I'm curious also if data security plays a role in these topics. Data management, data security, important.
I would just say, well, to reiterate what some folks said, I think, you know, having organization, storage methods, data management practices in place for organization before an event occurs, like that is key. And, you know, whether that be establishing those for your organization from, you know, other departments that don't use UAS. I've heard that that's very beneficial at times for, especially like small first responder departments. But also like doing training events with your data management workflows and storage practices and figuring out the little bugs that you know, may come up in a disaster scenario where you want things to go smoothly and you know, to the best of your ability. You can't always predict what's going to happen, but really making sure that you're, you know, establishing those beforehand. And about data security, I would say that that is definitely a consideration, although I don't know that I have the expertise to tackle that.
As far as data security goes, it's worth mentioning the differences between access and publishing, right? Like, especially in an emergency situation, there are a lot of people wanting to upload information, whether it's products, maps, pictures, just someone who has experience on this but doing this on their own and then trying to provide data for emergency responses. But that's not the same thing as allowing that information to be published out to the rest of the world. Those are two different responsibilities, right? You don't want to be pushing bad information or data that's not corrected or correctly analyzed, those kinds of things. And just some other things to mention too, like just having an awareness of what you do publish, right? Like if you're flying over with a drone and you are just trying to get a map, a damage assessment, but for a lot of people that are affected, that's their livelihood, and the last thing you want to be doing is publishing people searching through their lost things that are now destroyed, faces, personal identifiable information, addresses, those kinds of things.
Great, thank you very much. Anything else? Predictive modeling. Can you share examples of how predictive modeling and simulation have been used effectively in disaster preparedness or response?
I know, well, I personally don't have a ton of experience doing predictive modeling, but I know that our lab, we knew that there was like a large rainstorm and things coming to Vermont, and it was the thing that led to all this flooding was a number of factors, like compacted, saturated soil, along with a ton of rain over a very short period of time. And we have lots of valleys in Vermont, and towns are situated along bodies of water, which, you know, makes sense for historical purposes. For flooding, resiliency, not so much. But so we, actually another researcher at our university had developed a flood prediction model, and we were looking at that in GIS software, overlaying a map of our state's capital. And, you know, we were using that to say, you know, we think that these kind of key areas are going to be safe, and these others are likely going to get impacted by this 100+ year flood. And it was, you know, it wasn't entirely accurate, but it did help us have some insight, I think, into some of the preparation in terms of areas to focus in for the response, which, again, we had to adjust and shift in the moment when we were doing the response. And our data is now going to work into their edited and revised model, which is kind of cool because, you know, we use that on the front end, and now they're using some of our data and findings from the last 2 years to improve their modeling, which is pretty cool. I don't really understand it, but it's very useful to us. So.
I also don't do predictive modeling in this context, but I'll throw in a plug for work that's going on in my department at CSU, Civil Environmental Engineering. Our department has some faculty members who, for the last 6 years maybe, have led this multi-investigator, multi-institute, we call it the NIST Center for Resilience. So it's sponsored by the NIST, the National, does anyone know it? Institutes of Standards and Technology, yes. And they've been developing, I think, software models that communities can use to try to improve community resilience to disasters. So they've been working on things like flooding, tsunamis, tornadoes, wildfire, fire from going from home to home at the wildland-urban interface. And so there are tools that people have put together to try to predict both the physical and economic and social impacts of these types of events before they happen. But that's as much as I can say because I'm not personally involved on that project. But if you want to learn more, Google NIST Resilience Colorado State and you'll find something on it.
Now we'll shift to ethical considerations. What ethical considerations should be taken into account when deploying computing technologies like drones in disaster-affected areas? I think you touched on this already, but I'd like to hear a little bit more.
Well, I'll go ahead and start since Sean already gave one of the better answers. I think it is a challenge, right? Because we're trying, from a data collection standpoint, right? We're really trying hard to get as much information at the right time and place to make the world and the environment better in the future, right? To understand more now to prevent or respond in an appropriate way. But as Sean had mentioned, there's a lot of caveats to that. I remember when we had the fires of 2020, which was a great year anyway, and we had a lot of pictures that were coming out on the television set of burned complete like homes, but the people hadn't been notified yet, right? And so it's kind of like, well, those are just cases, right, where, yeah, we were trying to share what was going on, don't go up into the mountains, but at the same time, right, we were inadvertently hurting people even though we were collecting this data. So I think that's one. I think the second one is, I'll just throw back to the data security and data use piece, right? How we process and how we use data always has it, and how we tell the story around that always has an impact. We're scientists and we be objective as we possibly can, but there's still possibilities for data to be misused in ways, right, that tell a different story that may not be reflective of what it is that we're doing. So it's not necessarily us, but right, with open access data and other possibilities these days, which are good things in principle, but again, it's how we use them and how we think about this that's very important. And then the third one that I would mention is I think in any data set, especially when you're collecting lots and lots of data, there's always opportunities for potential gaps that we end up having to explain or find another source for that might be indirect. How do we think about how do we combine the data together in a way, right, that is appropriate when we start getting these very, very large data sets too. So those are some initial thoughts. I'm sure the panel has more and we can wrap back around.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what was said before. I think, dealing with personal identifying information or anytime people show up in the data that we're collecting, it can be a really sensitive topic. And so, I think in those circumstances, holding off before making data available is the prudent thing to do.
Just one thing I'd like to cover. It's quiet all of a sudden. It's kind of a sensitive subject, but equal coverage for your areas of responsibility. And what I mean is you would want to use your drone systems based on priority and necessity, right? Like, you don't want to be using your assets in an area you don't need to be using it in. And while someone else might actually be needing that real-time data, that near real-time mapping, that surveillance and monitoring, and I said the strong word surveillance, but I don't mean that in a police sense. I mean like trying to guide crews to like in a search rescue or something like that. That's what I meant by surveillance. But the last thing you want is a scenario where you've used drones on, say, a neighborhood that wasn't even affected. Meanwhile, there are plenty of reasons and uses over here, and they're not getting those resources allocated to them in that emergency.
So what future innovations within drone fields do you believe will have the most significant impact on disaster response and environmental resilience?
So since I'm the non-drone person, I will tell you that but I am a sensor person. I would tell you that I think the more data we can collect in real time that we can start bringing together to tell even a more complex story, I think will bring us closer to potential ways to either prevent or treat. So I think about this as an analogy to kind of the medical device world and the medical world, right? We talk a lot about, well, how much can we know about an individual, because that will then help us treat that individual better, right? And the more data that we can have in real time, the more we have it that's related to the situation, the better we can put the pieces together. And so I would say that with drone technology too, is that, if it's a thermal event, but within the thermal event, there's always going to be some type of atomic, okay, here comes my chemistry, atomic or some other type of elemental event at the same time, coupled to flow velocities or any other types of measurements for that event, help us then think about other creative ways to be innovative about how we might treat situations in the future.
Does anyone want to address how AI might be one of the innovations and the new ways AI is going to be used with drones? Maybe we'll come back to that and we'll ask. Go ahead.
I have a few things, and we could come back to it too, but I think AI will be great when it matures. We think about how we can use AI to do swarms of drones, right? To do photogrammetry, mapping, identify damaged areas, those kinds of things. But I don't think it's quite matured yet, right? And the thing about drones, though, is they require human operators, and they require skillful operators who understand what they're doing, and they require an expertise to process that and storage that data. So I think on one hand, it's a great idea, but I'm more on it's a hype side.
I guess I'll pose this to everyone. How long do you think it will be before drones are really flying out on their own and coming back with the data that you sent them off to find? Is that pushing hype too much? Okay. So let me follow up then. If we have drones already leaving the box with AI instructions, do you have any follow-ups on ethical considerations? And are there any other, I'm curious, are there any other impacts that you know about or are foreseeing that, let's say, what's going to be in a year? So this is already happening, but what will drones be doing in a year or two if you try to have a crystal ball to tell me where things were headed?
The National Park Service is contacting me because they're concerned about Amazon flying package delivery across the Blue Ridge Trail and other places that are historically off limits to drones. And shortest distance between two places may be across a national park. And so, again, I'm not a lawyer, but these are ethical and societal questions that need to be considered. And again, I don't have the answer, but things like corridors, maybe not over the Washington Monument, or how do you get drone flights around DC? There's going to be, again, I don't have the answers, but these are
Right.
questions we need to ask.
And no doubt, as you said this morning, there are all kinds of legal considerations associated with what happens when an AI-driven mission goes wrong and who's responsible and the nature of that. About community involvement, what role can communities play in providing data for computing systems used in disaster response, and how can these systems be made more accessible to the public? I guess this is kind of a citizen drone science. Any thoughts on that?
So I don't have the answer to this, but I think we can look to other enterprises that have gone out that have involved community data collection successfully. One that comes to mind is the Kokoraz rain gauge network, which started in Colorado and is now expanded. I think it's around the world now, really. There's a vast network of community rain gauges people put out in their backyards, and every morning at 7 o'clock they check the rain gauge and type it into the website, and if something happens, if there's a flood or a disaster and you want to know what did the rainfall look like, you can go to that and get a very pretty high quality, dense rain gauge network updated on a daily basis that you wouldn't be able to get with just the modern networks that federal agencies might be able to put out, for example. And so maybe part of the answer is if people can come up with a good open data distribution system similar to that website where people can upload their data, whether it's drone videos or images or whatever else people might be collecting, and just make it available to folks who could find use for it in the future. I think there's kind of the drone side of things, and then there's the data collection and distribution side of things, and the community involvement might benefit more from that data distribution side than advances in drone technology.
Something that I would add too is not so much on the citizen science type side, but thinking about like in a disaster scenario, I think it's a tricky balance for community involvement and engagement, especially with technology like drones. Like some folks were talking about earlier today, you don't want just anyone flying their drone during a disaster response scenario, especially if there are certain airspace restrictions in the area, whatever that may look like. And then there's kind of also the side of you want to make sure that to whatever extent possible, you can get this actionable technology in the hands of first responders, whether that be on a really, really small scale, like some rural towns in Vermont that have 2 people in their like fire and police department, and one of them happened to buy a drone and was like, yeah, let's learn how to use it, which is fantastic, especially when, like during a flooding event, like access may be extremely limited to and from them. So them having those tools to respond and to collect data in their local communities where they have local knowledge and more understanding of the place and people. Like that really puts a lot of power, I think, in communities' hands. So I think it's a tricky balance too of like, getting folks involved with drones and especially in disaster response more so and kind of trying to find that balance of where citizen science could fit in with that. Because I think that is a fantastic point of like making that data available, but when you're thinking about a disaster response, like how, I don't know, just thinking about like how that would fit in to UAS operations.
All right, I'd like to turn it over to the audience to pose questions to the panel.
For the specifically wildfires, is there any testing that you guys are aware of on using drones, specifically space drones, for applying a retardant? I know they're doing it down in Brazil. I didn't know if there was any work with any of the chemical manufacturers. Right now they're using spray rigs and airplanes or manned aircraft instead of unmanned aircraft, and we now have capability of spraying those areas outside of it to prevent it from going past that.
I'll just say, I have not heard of them doing that in the folks I've talked to around here who've been helping me out with the post-fire research that I've been working on. There has been talk about using drones to potentially help with post-fire vegetation recovery, putting seeds on these agricultural drones and doing some broadcast seeding, that sort of thing. That's still, I don't think that that's been done in that context yet either, but those are the types of questions that we might be able to start looking at with increasing frequency of fires and the need to approach them from different ways.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on that? Yeah.
I have a question. After a major flood or fire, often the person in the flood might break structures that typically control or in a fire to reduce all the trees and vegetation that direct the flow of water. So you can have a completely different flow, which can then impact homeowners and cause further issues. After a major disaster, do you know the typical floor there to be surveys or using those to evaluate the damage with respect to those ongoing impacts? Or is that more, I guess, is that an intentional effort, or is it haphazard, after we realize which step road we need to fix it?
I can talk again. So in the wildfire context, for example, there's a few things that happen that don't necessarily rely on drones at the moment. It's possible that drones might start to become incorporated moving forward, but there's a burn area response team, BAER, burn area emergency response, that will go out sometimes before the fire is even fully contained and assess the burn severity, which then becomes kind of a base level data product that goes into post-fire decision making in terms of where they might want to focus efforts. And that is sort of done with a combination of remote sensing imagery, typically from satellites, and then on-the-ground observations that get kind of combined to create maps of soil burn severity. And the reason soil burn severity is important is because it's directly related to the likelihood of increased flooding, erosion, debris flows. And so, I could potentially see for areas that can be covered by drones, getting potentially better burned area severity data using that type of technology, probably in combination with these other products that people have been using to improve that, or maybe make it happen faster. And then there was a second point I was going to make, but I'm now drawing a blank. So give me a second. Someone else can talk.
I can just back that up. I did fly there
and that just reminded me of what I was going to say. So the other thing, besides these bear reports that get produced, the USGS actually has a landslide hazards group in Golden, Colorado, that for pretty much every fire in the United States will take that burn severity product and quickly produce a map of the probability of a debris flow happening sort of across the burned area. And that's a big deal, right? Because the probability of debris flows, typically one of the biggest problems that we have after wildfire is it will rain on the burned ground. That rain that used to infiltrate into the ground now runs off much more quickly, mobilizes soil, and can bulk up into a debris flow that will travel down slope, clog up water supplies, potentially take out houses, trees, that sort of thing. After the 2020 fires in Colorado, we had a big debris flow that took out a number of houses at the base of a drainage and killed 4 people, and it took emergency responders weeks to find these people's bodies in the river. And so being able to use these types of data to guide both, I think, like evacuations and that sort of thing, as well as longer term recovery processes and efforts to try to prevent these post-disaster problems from becoming even bigger problems is one of the things that we can use these types of data to do a better job with.
Not so much drones, but to answer your question with a similar response, there is a graduate student here in the GIS program who is studying the effects of wildfires on watersheds and water quality. And she's doing it, she's gone back to 1970, she's using satellite imagery, and she's using things like normalized difference water index to monitor the where water bodies have been affected, the turbidity and reflectivity of that water, and she's using burn severity, normalized difference vegetation index to see the regrowth, looking for statistical inferences, you know, is there a fire here every 10 years, 5 years, what percentage of this huck is being affected, those kinds of things. So keep your eye out for that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So asking about how rapidly were we able to push data from once the drone landed to getting the data to decision makers or uploaded to like a web service. It kind of depended because we were collecting lots of different types of data in the initial phases of the response. You know, oblique images were able to be shared very quickly if there was something that, well, at the very beginning of the response, the Emergency Operations Center wasn't tasking us officially yet because they were still trying to like get a handle on all the other things they were trying to manage. But if they had, you know, asked for like an oblique image of a landslide, which wasn't uncommon with all the flooding and like soil instability, like that is something that we could have gotten to them within minutes if that was a really, you know, if they said of this specific location we need some photos of a certain angle of the landslide. That's something we could get to them, I think, within minutes. In our initial response during the flooding, I mentioned we collected a lot of mapping imagery, especially of, well, many areas in Vermont, but especially our state capital. And that data we collected on the second day of our response, and I don't remember how many acres it was, but it was a large enough area that it took pretty much all day to map. Within 72 hours of collecting that data and of the drone landing, we had processed image orthomosaics that were orthorectified, from ArcGIS to ArcGIS Online, and those, I think, at that point in our workflow, it was a lot of emails, which is that became a lot more efficient as the response went on, and this year that's something we've improved. But at the time, the director of our lab was emailing these data products to like his contacts at FEMA, which, you know, that was another level of project management that I, you know, aspire to be at. But a short answer to your question, it was about, for some of these very large scale image orthomosaics, you know, the span of a couple days to have them processed and in the hands of FEMA for disaster declaration. And that's just one example. We definitely, like with more rapid processing of smaller areas, we were able to get things uploaded to a web service, like this year, for example, with a little bit of a more efficient workflow. And some folks from the Vermont Center for Geographic Information Systems, they helped us like kind of package up a workflow that is a bit more efficient, that is a lot more efficient than emailing folks. Thankfully, we learned that one. But with some of those, like especially smaller areas where it's not like a whole city, well, what some people here probably consider a town, but for Vermont, it's a city. You know, it can be a few hours too. So it kind of depends on the scale, but.
Usually processing time and accuracy always kind of mismatch. So when you get product that quickly, you can now, what's the accuracy on those? You have like some standards that you have really get results quickly. So if you want to go with this level of accuracy, or how do you make those decisions?
Yeah, it again kind of depends on the scenario and what is being asked of us. For the most part, our standard of like imagery accuracy for photogrammetry is within 3 centimeters for the most part. And you, I mean, having done over 130 flights in 2023 in this under 2-month time span, definitely, you know, there were some outliers, I'm sure, but with we have a state, what's it called? A VRS, a virtual reference system network that we can use to RTK or PPK the data for accuracy. And I think in pretty much all instances, if we can use that, but if for some reason that was down, like it was for some of the flooding, we're able to set up a base station and make sure that the accuracy is up to our standards. But in terms of our processing workflow, there wasn't a huge trade-off in terms of getting that level of accuracy, especially because, you know, in some cases we were trying to map a whole town, but a lot of times it was more localized kind of chunks of like smaller areas throughout the state. It ended up being a ton of data, but when we were processing it, you know, making sure that, I guess, the scale of the data that we were processing was small enough to be able to be rapidly processed with that level of accuracy was something we considered. Did that kind of answer your question? Yeah.
I'm not sure how Wyoming does it, but coming out of the state of Florida where disasters happen many times a year for various things, it starts with pre-planning, honestly. In the state of Florida, any drone resources report themselves to the USC, State Operations Center, during times of non-disaster. And so ahead of time, I have 6 drones, 3 sets of
it's fun to brainstorm about this, but let's do that while we've got power and stuff. And then think about when you need to get that data you collected in Vermont to the EOC, and you're going to probably have to have somebody be a runner with a drive, a stick, so they can plug it in to say, hey, here's the data I collected, the oblique image that I need, right? Things like this are really important. So Starlink and these types of connectivity issues need to be thought about as well for these types of things.
Yeah, thanks for bringing us down to earth, right? But there's a trade-off between the science and thinking forward, and also what's real and what needs to be done in a crisis and an emergency situation.
I strongly encourage Wyoming to get together. Whoever your state is, you should talk to the governor. But these are the types of things that you should talk about now before the fire's blowing in from the
Right.
state next door. And it is great to have resources at universities, but again, it's too late if they're calling you from EOC saying, hey, University of Wyoming, I need your drone.
Right, or maybe it's the fire coming in Fort Collins that's next to the Infectious Disease Research Center.
I was there 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. Right
Okay, I think you know.
Wyoming doesn't have to do the exact same thing. We are on the list also, but they have a Homeland Security Division resources. But actually, it's the same thing. We did two things all on, so actually.
And
Say, we even had this year in Wyoming where I went out and helped out the Forest Service simply by just throwing a radio on there and making it act as a repeater. So in Vermont, you might not have it as much with the even though you have the mountains there, but especially Colorado, here, Montana, a lot of these wildfires are out in the middle of nowhere. So sometimes it's not the image part, but we just literally electrically take the radio to the bottom of the drone and move it up on the mountain. So that way the EOC, well, the base camp that they had, could talk to the Paris, the smoke numbers and everybody else.
And are you doing that as a citizen, or is that something that's coordinated?
That was me going to the Forest Service office and asking, hey, is there anything I can do to help months in advance? And then once there was like 7 fires going, and there's more fires than there's firefighters.
You can be a help. I think we have time for one more question. Anybody? Well, then this is a good place to thank our speakers, thank our panelists one more time. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
So, thank you for a very good discussion on drone applications during disaster response and environmental monitoring. And then thanks, Matt, for bringing us to the ground. Yes, we do work with satellite images for drone response, so I'm familiar with it. So it's one good thing, we don't have to worry about flying the satellites through, but they do have 17 space agencies working together on that. So thank you so much. And so I have a request before we have the closing remarks. So today we had the opportunity to listen to a lot of folks talk about their experience with drones, what they have done with it. But tomorrow morning, the second keynote speaker for the event is coming from Idaho State University. I've known her for a little more than 10 years. She is an amazing person in terms of she has been in the forefront. Anytime a new sensor comes, we turn around and Donna is already using it, okay? Somebody says, hey, we need to check this out, and then, oh, Donna is already using it, It's a very amazing person, and she has been to the first UAV Symposium in 2016. So for those who came at that time, please come back and see how many new things she has added to her long list of accomplishments. But if you have not seen or heard her, please come tomorrow morning to listen to her, and then you can go either to the workshop or to the drone demo. So please come. tomorrow morning. It's at 8:15 is our keynote. Dr. Melissa, you will give the opening remarks tomorrow. Right. So with that, I would like to invite Dr. Allen to give the closing remarks for day one.
Thank you. Thank you, Ramesh. I was a little confused there about closing remarks in the middle of the middle of the symposium. So these are kind of midpoint remarks. But I think these are our only midpoint closing remarks, right? So because tomorrow we go straight into the 2 workshops. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming along. Thank you for staying. It's been I know it's a long day. It seems like, I know you get here in the morning, it doesn't seem like it's going to be so long, but it's actually tiring to soak up all that information and to hear all those things. But I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot from the Delhi and his co-chair, Sejan Zhu. I don't know if Sejan is still around. He may have a class, but they really did a lot of work working with the team and the program committee to arrange this. There's so much discussions that go into making the program really productive and the event work. So I really want to thank them, and particularly Sejan, who stepped in kind of halfway to pick up and help when we had to change our co-chairs. Also to the rest of the committee, so Aisha Demir, Sean Field, Michael Kirby, particularly excited to have somebody from CSU help with this. I think it really helped us with the program. Also want to thank the keynote speakers from today and the invited speakers, and thank the speakers for tomorrow in advance. I'm sure the talks will be great. I do want to give a big shout out for our local organising team, who I was really impressed with how professional the event has worked this year. So Judy Yates, who's probably outside somewhere taking care of things. Lorna Chavez, who's at the front here, and Tom Musselman, who's one of our administrators, who did put so much work into this event behind the scenes, but isn't around today or tomorrow to see the fruits of his labour, but really did a lot. Lorna, the signs were all great. Swag is great. I think everything really, the web page was good, so thank you for all your work on that. Hopefully everyone appreciated the organisation. So tomorrow, as Ramesh said, we have more events here. We have a couple of keynotes, and we have the workshops. We have the drone demo, where there are, I think, buses to get people out to our, where is it going to be? Is it the indoor practice? Okay, all right. It's somewhere, but you don't need to know where it is, because there'll be a bus to take you, I guess, is the answer to that. Right, that's right. Yeah, exactly, that's right. You come here, you listen to a talk, and then you get taken by a bus to a place that I don't know where it is, but it is nearby. Okay. So with that, next we have another poster session, and hopefully plenty of time for people to talk to each other and learn more. So thank you again to everybody, and see you all tomorrow. Thank you.